Okay, welcome to the meeting of the CNCF IoT Edge working group. The meeting is recorded, so I hope everybody are okay with that. If not, yeah, turn off your cameras and mute yourself or disconnect. So today, Kate said she will be a little bit late, and she wanted to continue with the WebAssembly and the component model. But before she joins, we can have a birds of a feather discussion. So if anybody have any topics, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, you've probably seen that I've been participating in the Elf Edge activities. So Joe actually just wrote the book. So there are some interesting ideas in the book. So I know you haven't probably got the book yet. So basically in there, they talk about like so basically it says for in there already in that book he already mentioned about WebAssembly. There are several ways to do it. It runs Rust program. You can run it directly, directly embedded without an operating system, or you can do it real-time operating system. And so yeah, so there are multiple ways. So at least for me, I like to probably eventually find out, like, in order to run any program, what are the options with or without an operating system? What's the implication for Wasm on there? There are other things, like, for example, there's a thing called TinyML, right? That's a running machine learning workload on the embedded system. What are other infrastructure options? That's what I'm interested in.
So Victor, can you post link to the book?
Yeah, and Joe was gonna actually, I was gonna introduce Joe to Kate first, and for him to join to give us a talk, and he already joined the Slack and self-introduced. So I posted the link to his book in the main Slack channel.
Oh, in the main one. Okay, yeah, I see it now. Sorry. Yeah. Hey, Kate, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know how my audio is. Hi, everyone. I'm at my company offsite in Mexico, so I'm trying to find a little corner where it is a little more quiet. But yeah, I'm here. But definitely, it might be a little loud. It should calm down in like 10 minutes. But I don't know if Joe's going to show up, but if he does, it'd be great to chat a little bit about LFEdge and the CNCF working group. And that's a great bridge to have connected. Victor, that's great. But if he doesn't, I'm happy to keep talking about the WebAssembly story. I added to the slides, and I know last time we said, okay, we kind of took a deep dive into WebAssembly and components and what those are. Maybe it would be nice to kind of zoom out a little. I know Victor tried to keep going with some of the component model tooling and ran into some issues with it just because of the level of depth that it is. You do need to understand like the Rust compiler a fair bit if you're going to go the Rust route. So I was going to say we could go a level higher today and talk about some developer tooling that makes it easier and go through the story of running WebAssembly and Kubernetes, if that's interesting to people, or we can completely change topics.
No, I think that's great. I personally would like to hear more about it.
Okay, great. Well, give me a second. I'm going to find a table real quick so that I can go ahead and pull up my terminal and do some demos. Do you all have the link to the PowerPoint that I shared last time? I think it's in the Google Docs there.
Yeah. I can share it with the rest of the group.
Cool. I'm situated, so I will go ahead and pull everything up. Great.
Do you want us to interrupt with questions, Kate, or save them to the end?
Hey, everyone. Please interrupt. It's fine.
Cool.
Okay, I will share my screen too. Give me a second to set up my terminals real quick.
Yeah.
And do you all want to follow along too?
After demo, do you might maybe zip up the directory and share the zip file? Because there's, for example, there must be some directory, some file I didn't modify properly. If I have that zip file of that directory of the, for example, add for that last example, that might help.
So I'm not going to walk through that example. We're going to go a level higher, but offline we can do that if you want, or I can demo that deeper level in a future meeting if we want. Dehan, can you share screen? Give me permissions to do that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, great.
Okay.
I've got it now. Okay. Cool. So I am on a laptop, so you're just going to see everything. Okay. So I'm just going to start with the slides. I just ran through everything yesterday, and then I shared all of the essentially all of the scripts here so that if you want to rerun it yourself, you can. So basically this section is Spin and Kubernetes. So I'm going to zoom out a little and talk about Spin for a second. So Spin is an open source tool that my company Fermion has put together, and it's become the de facto way of building serverless WebAssembly applications. So if you want to find Spin, there's documentation here walking through all the details and a quick start, hello world, all of that jazz. And if you want to follow along, feel free to install it. It works on, that's not Zoom chat, sorry. It works on like all major operating systems. Like I mentioned last time, Wasm time is its runtime. So when we were talking about where can I run this question, the answer to that is once again, where can you put the runtime? So this runtime is Wasm time. So you'll only be able to run it where Wasm time can run, which is on 64-bit architectures. So yeah, feel free to install that if you want to follow along. Spin is it isn't a CNCF project, but it is in the CNCF Wasm landscape. And that's because it is one of the first tools out there that came about for running, people say server-side WebAssembly, but essentially making it easier to run WebAssembly outside of the browser. So once you've installed Spin, let me just delete my quick start right here. And then I'm going to just follow the exact same steps that is in the PowerPoint. Also, please interrupt me if things aren't showing up. Like I'm talking to a slide that doesn't seem to be there, or my slides aren't big enough, stuff like that. So basically, Spin is the quick CLI for getting started building WebAssembly applications and also running them. So when you do like just enter Spin, you have all these different subcommands. So subcommands for building Spin applications, for logging in if you want to use our cloud. There's templates and plugins to make things easier. And then there's this up command for running it locally, and then a watch command to make it more interactive, like your JavaScript experience. And so what we're going to do here first is we're going to build a new Spin application. And actually, instead of doing this full command, I'm going to show you how that looks. So if you do a Spin new, there's all these templates that basically when we've talked about what language can I build WebAssembly in, there's a lot out there. And this is a good example of that. So I have, you know, Seed, Go, Grain. Grain is a language that was built actually just for WebAssembly. JavaScript, PHP, Python, Rust, Swift, TypeScript, Zig, on and on, Go. So all these languages for that are built-in default templates for running WebAssembly. And so you can pick one of those. So I'm going to go with Rust. You pick your template and then give it a name. And oh, I thought I already deleted it. Oh, whatever. The description isn't required, but we'll just make it happy. When we specify HTTP path, we're basically saying what endpoint of the HTTP request triggers this handle. So if we go into spin quick start, actually, we're just gonna, yeah, if we go into spin quick start, we'll see here that we have a standard Rust project. So if you're familiar with Rust, you have your cargo.toml, which defines your application. And then you have your source directory with your code. And if we just look at what's inside of that library, it's basically just a handle that receives an HTTP request, and it's just going to respond with hello Fermion. So now that we have this, we've quickly generated an application that's scaffolded, we could edit it, whatever. The next thing is you're going to do a simple spin build. And you'll see that we just did a cargo build target Wasm 32 WASI release. That was done for you. So this is using Rust WebAssembly toolchain, and it's doing that for you. You didn't have to learn what that command was for Rust. You don't have to learn what that is for Go, for JavaScript, whatever. Spin build will do that for you for the language ecosystem that exists. So we just built a WebAssembly module. So if we looked at target, yeah, go for it.
What's in the spin.toml?
Sure, that's a great question. So the spin.toml defines what each of spin's commands do and defines what your application looks like. So let me actually zoom in a little bit more here. But you know how I said cargo said spin build does this command? Well, that's defined in the spin.toml. So you can see what the build command's actually going to run. And say you wanted to do something more tailored, you could modify that command too. We also automatically have a watch specification so that if I did spin watch and modified this file, spin would automatically rebuild it for me, creating like kind of a flow similar to what JavaScript has. It also spin then knows where your output WebAssembly file is. So it knows then when you do a spin up, which effectively runs that WebAssembly module in Wasm at one time, it knows where that is. So actually this is where that file was. So we can see we created this during the spin build, that WebAssembly file. And then you also have a trigger. So this is what I was hinting at earlier. This is what triggers your WebAssembly component to run. So there's multiple types of triggers for spin. The main two are HTTP. So hitting an endpoint triggers that handle that we saw, the hello world. Or you could have Redis, for example. So maybe you're subscribed to a certain Redis channel, and once there's a message on the channel, that will trigger this WebAssembly function. There's a lot of other things you can configure here. So WebAssembly is a sandbox. So you explicitly need to tell the host what it has access to. So by default, that module is going to have access to no files, no outbound hosts. Like you can't send any outbound HTTP requests, no environment variables, nothing, unless you specify it for the host. And Spin makes that simple. So if you want to enable outbound HTTP requests, you can give the list of endpoints that are allowed. It's an allow list. If you want to add environment variables, you can add a section here to do that. If you want to add secrets, you can do that here. If you want to add access to a key value store, SQL stores, files, all of that you would configure in your spin.toml. And you don't have to think about how to hook up the WebAssembly host runtime with that. Spin will do it for you. Are there other questions about this manifest here? And all of that is explained in Spin's documentation. So if you're interested in like API guides for key value stores, also we have support for locally using serverless AI. So you can run an LLM locally, or you can use one from Fermion Cloud and still develop locally. But yeah, relational database, key value, Redis stores, etc. And that's all configurable through this manifest. And just to give like Spin is really becoming quite universal. So Nginx, for example, runs Spin as a runtime, and you can now run Spin on AKS. So the idea of this being a way to configure what your WebAssembly application looks like, ideally can be somewhat of a way of making it simpler to configure guest level resources for your WebAssembly application. And also, this is a lot, like I'm trying to go surface and then we can go more in depth, but TLDR, the spin.toml is how you configure your Spin application with resources. Cool, I'm gonna do, now we can go ahead and run. And so you do a spin up. So now I have this running locally and you can just curl that application and hello Fermion. If we wanted to do something like this, I don't know, we can change this to be hello CNCF. Can build and run it in one, roll again, hello CNCF. So that's the developer experience for, we just built, ran a WebAssembly component, and Spin actually converts the module into a component for you during runtime. So while that .wasm file is a WebAssembly module, we convert it to a component when we run it. Which doesn't really do much for you at the moment, but as the component ecosystem evolves, that becomes really important. And we can run straight up components too. Say you get a WebAssembly module that's pre-built from somewhere and just put it in your spin.toml, well, you can run that too. And this Spin application can be multiple WebAssembly components. So if we look back at that spin.toml, this is just one of the endpoints, one component called Spin Quick Start. We could have added other components to it and built it up into this larger application with multiple endpoints. So that is Spin. I'm happy to keep diving into that or zoom ahead and just deploy this to Kubernetes and see what that looks like.
Yeah, both are good for me.
Let me go back to the Zoom and see if there's any questions. I can't see if people are raising their hands and such, so feel free to stop me if you have questions. The only other thing I'll say is one of the things about Spin is that this app can run in clouds. So you can deploy this to Kubernetes or you could deploy it to Fermion Cloud. So if you do a Spin deploy, now this is going to be deployed to the cloud. So all of you all can now access it. So once we have an endpoint, you can curl it and see hello CNCF. So that's kind of the built-in, like now you've pushed this to a host for your serverless application. And it's accessible anywhere. So basically any of you all can say hello to this, hello to CNCF now. And that's kind of the full loop of the experience. And just to show you a little bit what that looks like, this is what the Fermion Cloud portal looks like. And I don't know, there's various different, you can have many apps and they can have front ends and all of that. They can have key values. Like here's a to-do app that I have that can have to-dos, so learn, and we can add to-dos. And then this is all with the back end of this is, I believe, is this key value or SQL? No, it's SQL. So this backend is SQL. We have other apps that you could have because you could have stored these in a SQL database or a key value store. But yeah, so you can build all different types of apps, and that's kind of that experience, kind of just showing that you can do real things with WebAssembly now. Obviously a to-do app isn't the full-fledged example. I don't have bigger ones up on my cloud right now though. Cool, so going back to the Kubernetes story. So we just built a WebAssembly application doing this spin new thing. You can choose your language of choice. We ran it locally and then we deployed it to a cloud, etc. It looks like Victor has, this isn't a spin thing. This looks like, Victor, this error isn't from,
Don't worry about me. I'll wait for someone who knows the development better to finish it. I'll follow. That just something I probably didn't install properly. Yeah.
So you did a spin new and then the spin build was an error?
Yeah, spin build ended up in the error. Yeah.
So are you sure this wasn't something that you were working on previously? Because this line 24 through 27 does not look like something that would be in a REST file. That looks like the example.
Could be because I was sharing the same directory as the
You just
source
make sure
example.
you're CD'd into the correct directory.
Okay.
Because that doesn't look right. But we can look at that after if we want. Okay, so we'll skip over Wasm time. We can go back to that if we have time later. Okay, so let's run this on Kubernetes. So we just built this spin application. Now can we put this on Kubernetes? So first thing we'll do is let's create a cluster. So I'm going to create a K3D cluster, just a small cluster with inside a Docker container. Let me make sure I don't have one right now. Oh, I do. Great. Sorry, 1 second. Oops. All right. Now let's create our cluster. Okay. So we're going to create a cluster here that has a containerd shim. So it has a shim on that containerd talks to that will execute WebAssembly modules instead of executing containers. So this shim was created by the Deis Lab team at Microsoft. And they have a shim for multiple different WebAssembly runtimes. So while this is building, let's go ahead and look at that repo. Containerd Wasm shims. So this is a Deis Lab project from Microsoft. And they have shims for all these different runtimes. So, and spin is the one we're doing. And basically, instead of run C, it uses run WASI, which will then tell spin to spin up your application so that it's available within your Kubernetes cluster. The details of the shim we can get into if we have time later. But think of it as instead of running containerd is marshaling a request to run WASI instead of run C, and that is executing your spin app. Now that we have created our cluster, we can make sure it's running. Cool. Here I have, so now that we have our cluster set up, we need to create a runtime class. Basically, this class is something that will attach to our deployments that will tell containerd to use the WASI shim. So if we look at our runtime class, this is it. It's just we're applying a runtime class called wasmtime spin v2, and the handler is spin. That tells containerd to execute it with spin instead of executing container. So let's apply that runtime. So now we have a runtime class applied. And next, let's go ahead and push our spin app to a registry. So if we go back into the spin quick start, we've built the spin app. Now let's go ahead and push it. So all this does is takes that .wasm file and puts it in an OCI artifact. This is not containerizing it. So the Open Container Initiative or OCI you can have multiple different types of artifacts packaged into OCI images. So just want to clarify that this is not a container. It is just a method of portability. So I'm just pushing this to TTL.sh, so this will be available for an hour, so long as that does not already exist. Great. So we've pushed our spin app to TTL.sh in an OCI artifact. And let's go ahead and apply our Kubernetes. Let's go ahead and now apply this to our cluster. So I've created a deployment. Oops, sorry. And in this deployment, we basically are going to have one replica. This is where we specify the container D shim should run it. So Wasm times spin v2. If we did not specify it, this would fail because we're trying to run WebAssembly as a container, which it is not a container. So that would have failed if we don't add that. We specified our image that we just pushed. And then we're also going to put a service in front of it so that we can, curl it. Great. Cool. So our creating, it's running. So our spin app is now running in our cluster. We have our service in front of it. And now we're just going to port forward that service and put it on 8083 and then hello CNCF. So great. We just built a WebAssembly application, pushed it up to a container registry as an OCI artifact, and then pulled it down and ran it in Kubernetes using a container dshim. And that was all using Kubernetes concepts, pods, deployments, services, OCI images, all of that. Incredibly Kubernetes native experience, but with WebAssembly being the underlying unit of compute. And that's my demo.
So Kate, you said runtime class needs to be installed. So that's only thing on a vanilla Kubernetes. There's the shim is already there.
No, you have to add the shim. So when we go back to this K3D cluster create, the image for this cluster is one that Deus Labs has created that has the container D Wasm shim applied. I don't remember the exact path of container D shims in your path for your nodes, but if you don't use K3D, for example, so for example, on AKS, they have Wasm nodes. And all that means is that on all of those nodes, they've added the container D shim within the container D shim paths. So I think it's like opt container D shim, and then you add a binary. So you would add the binary from this repository from their releases, and you just add it at the container D path. So that's a prerequisite. You install your cluster, add the shim to the expected path within every node, and then add the runtime class so that works for you. That's a lot of steps, right? So instead, you can use KWasm, which does that all for you. So KWasm simplifies the process of adding the shim to your cluster for every cluster type out there almost. So whether it's AWS or Azure, or actually Docker has it automatically enabled. So within Docker, you can tell it to, maybe it'll open, enable Wasm. So in Docker, if you go to, so you can add KWasm to Docker. Say you don't want to run this in a cluster, but you just want to run this like on Docker locally or something. You could do that. And then there's also, I think, advanced tools. You can go to extensions or features in development. Yeah. And then you can do container D for pulling and storing images, and then enable Wasm. and that will add the container dshim to Docker locally if you want to play around with it there. So yeah, all of those are options as well.
Awesome, thanks. So if you do it on the, sorry for asking too much questions.
No.
So if you enable it on the local Docker, then you can do Docker run, and instead of deploying the Kubernetes, the container will be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
I actually haven't played around with that. My assumption is you do a Docker run. Yeah. So you would do a Docker run, and yeah, pass your image, that OCI image that we built. I'll share this with you. And so to me, that doesn't really make sense to do, because you could just do a spin up if you want to do it locally. But I guess like, say you want to do the equivalent in your own orchestration system, instead of using Kubernetes, you have some sort of, I don't know, does anyone use their own like third-party orchestrator that's not like Nomad or Kubernetes or managed? I don't know. But say you're doing that and you want to do, you're orchestrating a bunch of Docker runs. That could
Maybe
be
compose,
a good approach for you. Here, let me link this for that walkthrough for that. And Docker also supports Wasm Edge, which is a CNCF project. It's another WebAssembly runtime, Wasm Edge. So you've heard of that. So you can run Wasm Edge and Docker using Docker Run as well. So there's multiple different runtimes to try out with that as well, if you want to go with the Docker Run experience. Or Wasm Edge, similarly, you could just do whatever Wasm Edge's CLI is, run to run locally.
Perfect, thanks.
But yeah, so let me see if and I added the deployments here in case you want to do all of this on your own. And then, like I mentioned, AKS, WASI node pools. You say your company already uses AKS. You can just configure your nodes to support WebAssembly applications, and that's all you have to do. So depending on like what Kubernetes system you're using, it's easier. And this has been around for, a while that they've supported WASI node pools. So almost a year. Yeah. And I'm trying to think if there's other things are there other things that you all have questions around with Spin, Kubernetes, with WebAssembly, all of that jazz? I know that was fast, but I just wanted to show you how quick it is. I think that was part of the point I was trying to make, is that there is tooling that it's trying to simplify this. Like last time we talked about all the depth of the Wasm tools and all the Bytecode Alliance tooling, and that I would say is the lowest layer. And I wanted to bring us up a layer to say like, oh, if you use some of these higher level tools like Spin or Wasm Cloud and Wash that Liam works on, you're kind of brought out of the nuances of WebAssembly, and you're automatically given a place to run it, and it can run on Kubernetes. So I wanted to bring us up a layer to show like this ecosystem actually isn't that scary. It is approachable, and people are finding a way to make it more approachable.
Thank you, Katie. This is Sunil. I'm new to Spin, so this is a great start for me to look at the demo and the developer quick start. I was curious, just a fundamental question: how is the Spin offering from CNCF different from Fermyon? Is there like a commercial version of Spin which comes from Fermyon?
Hi, Sunil. So Spin.
Okay.
There's only one offering of Spin. There's no, I mentioned that Spin is in the CNCF WebAssembly landscape in the sense of it's on that grid, but it is not a CNCF project. Spin is an open source project from Fermyon. So it is just a Fermyon project, but it's fully open source. It's licensing as Apache 2, has 75 contributors and a discourse and has a governance style that's very similar to the CNCF in the sense of standard meetings and contribution guidelines and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it is a Fermion project that has full open source governance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. But yeah, if you do like to contribute to open source code, this is the place to do it. So, and you can get to this repository from where we were earlier, if you're interested in that. And then if you want to just like get a happy, like be gratified pretty quickly, we do have kind of a hub that you can quickly deploy something. So for example, here's an example of like an RSS feed over HTTP. And you can quickly deploy this to cloud. And this uses AI in the background. So we have an extension to Spin so that you can run LLM inferencing requests and all of that in a WebAssembly application, which is really cool. That's not, the LLM is not running within WebAssembly, but the requests are being marshaled from the host to an LLM and back. And there's an interface for that. But yeah, if you want to get a quick happy path, the Spin Up Hub is a good place to kind of get started and play around with that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kate, I got a question, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
So
for it.
the quick question. So can we do like a spin up AWS? I might be mistaken.
Like, can I do a spin deploy to AWS?
Yeah, or like you did like a spin up, and that, or do we have to
Yes.
use like a Fermion cloud?
Yeah, so so I think this is a semantic thing. So spin up runs it locally. Spin deploy will push it to a cloud. So I think we're talking about deploy,
Oh, okay.
right? So when I did, sorry, I should have been doing spin cloud deploy. So spin has something called plugins, spin plugin list. And there's all these different plugins. I recently reinstalled a fresh thing, so I don't have all the plugins, but Cloud is our plugin for deploying to Fermion Cloud. AWS does not support Spin right now, like their Kubernetes service does not. So there isn't like Spin AWS deploy, but if in the future they do, they can add a plugin and it could be within the Spin system. Anyone can add a plugin. It's like a simple plugin system. We also have a Wasm K8s plugin to simplify what I just did so that you don't have to apply the service class, create your deployment, all that. I don't have it installed right now, but we do have that. I just wanted to show you the steps. And then for AWS, I believe that is configured through the portal. Like Azure portal is very opinionated. And so within the Azure portal, you would just click a button that says node pool, and then you would specify the image that we just showed earlier of like our OCI image. But I think in the future, there's a chance that there would be an AKS plugin. I don't think that's the priority right now, though.
So this K8s plugin is just calling Kubernetes API, right?
Yeah, or in a way.
So if we have like infrastructure, like in private site, we can develop our plugin to manage from Spin.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So for example, this K8s plugin actually isn't in. So if we go to, also our app was deployed, but we'll look at that in a second. If we go to the Spin plugins, this is open source. All of the plugins are here that are ones that have been added to the core plugins repository, but there's also ones that I don't know what the Spin K8s one is. But the K8s plugin actually is not within our core repo. So you have to go fetch it and install it, but that's in someone else's hosted repository. And there's several of those. So it doesn't have to be, it also could be proprietary, like all of that jazz too.
Okay, thanks.
And then just to look at like more of a fully featured app that we just deployed from Spin Up Hub, the one with the AI sentiment analysis. I was gonna load that one. Okay, so the not AI sentiment analysis, it's the RSS feed. I actually have never deployed this, so I don't even know what it's supposed to do. So this is a very bad demo. What is this supposed to do? It fetches an RSS feed over HTTP, parses the feed, and extracts some data. The data is then used to assemble a prompt that is sent to Spermian Service AI. The result is that AI summarizes the content of recent stories on the newsfeed. Okay, so we just basically got a summary of stories. Not super exciting. Let's see if we can get a different summary. But yeah, there's lots of different, oh, there's a new summary. TechCrunch news is related to the cloud. Wow, Blue Sky has 800,000 new users. Who knew? Great. Are there other questions?
Are there any examples of how people are using WebAssembly on Kubernetes? Any like big apps or services that people have published?
On Kubernetes, I'm trying to think of. So I don't know the answer to that because we don't have like a Fermion Kubernetes offering that we're like licensing to people. So like I don't have examples of customers who are doing this. I think Microsoft would know the answer to that in the sense of that they have people using their WASI node pools and it's probably private customers. But I don't have examples of people who are like sharing that they're using that architecture at the moment publicly. But I know telecom is like Liam was mentioning cases that telecom is using WebAssembly in a distributed manner using Wasm Cloud. I don't know if Kubernetes is the orchestrator. So my answer is I don't know if people are orchestrating with Kubernetes at the very moment right now. And if they are, it might be proprietary. So yeah, that would be great to get some examples of people doing it. It is still early for that. I do anticipate that within the year, we're going to have some good public examples of that where people are using it at scale with Kubernetes as the operator or the orchestrator, sorry.
Cool. Thanks, Kate.
I need to hop off soon. But I guess my question to y'all would be, was this helpful? Where do we want to go with this learning journey? Where are we at in this journey? We spent 2 working group sessions talking about it. Where do we want to take this knowledge or keep going with this knowledge?
It was super helpful, definitely, from my perspective.
Super helpful. Yeah, thank you, Kate. I was curious, would there be any kind of a talk presentation on Spin at the KubeCon?
Yes. Okay, KubeCon, I believe we should. So I think KubeCon, there's going to be, I don't know exactly, actually. Let me just check right now. I think so, but I am not positive if we have explicit talks. Are you going to be at KubeCon Europe?
I'm still TBD. Yeah, I was in Amsterdam last year, so yeah, I'm still deciding.
Awesome. Well, if you do go, we for sure have a booth, and we normally have a workshop so the past 2 KubeCons, we've had a workshop on WebAssembly and Kubernetes, and we normally give it with Microsoft. And the past 2 years, we've had over 400 people come, and we walk through pretty much what I just demoed, but with a more exciting application, not just the hello world. So we have, yes, we have a talk called Leveling Up WebAssembly Score in Kubernetes. I'll send this to you. We have multiple talks that are going to be about it. I just wasn't sure.
Sure.
Let me find the chat. There we go. Here's one of them that's very tailored to the WebAssembly and Kubernetes story that we will have. And then we have one that is focused on building a serverless AI application with WebAssembly. That will also be at the event if you're interested in learning about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it.
So yeah, I think is very interesting. So two things. One is the if I want to follow up, I don't want to bother you for just two basic questions. If I have any follow up, should I follow up in the Fermion Discord server if I don't like questions on very basic questions or somewhere else? Is there like a place people are trying the component example, for example?
So if you want to use spin, well, first of all, my recommendation would be for you to step out of that component example and to instead use a higher level tool like spin. But if you do want, just because it sounds like some of it is understanding with the Rust compiler, some of the issue there. But if you want to hands-on and pair on it, it might be most efficient if we just hop on a call for 15 minutes to talk about how that works, like the Rust compiler and everything. If you are committed to that example and using Rust, then yes, we can debug it together, or the Bytecode Alliance would be who you would be reaching out to. So because it's a specific repo that is informing that knowledge track, I personally think it's a best practice to leave an issue within that repo. So I would leave it in the component docs repository, would leave your question. I'll link to that because I believe that's where you're getting your example. But if you want to know what the equivalent chat interface is for that group, it would be Zulip, which is linked, is the Z in the upper corner of this. So that is the Bytecode Alliance's chat for WebAssembly related questions. Otherwise, if you're using Spin and have questions, definitely Spin repository, Discord, all of that would be great options as well.
Okay, thank you. For the add example, that will be Bytecode Alliance. The Zulip is where to ask questions if I want to try more, right?
Yes, or the
okay.
repository itself, which would be the component docs.
Okay, yeah. Second is Joe is interested in giving a talk about his book, and then of course from there on, see where can find synergies between the two organizations. I'll follow up with you and Joe offline to schedule that.
I mean, this like is a community-led group, so feel free to keep that inside the IoT Edge working group chat, unless he wants it to be more private. But I don't think we have a plan for the next meeting. So if he is feeling eager and in 2 weeks is willing to give the talk, that sounds fine with me. I don't know, Dehan, if you had other thoughts on that, but
No,
if he's
all good.
good to go.
Any week is fine, right?
Yeah, anytime that's within the working group meeting sessions. Yeah.
I'll just let him post his availability in the main channel then.
Awesome. And then I should head out, but everyone who like had some takeaways from the past 2 sessions with WebAssembly, feel free to ping me separately if you have any feedback about it, whether it's just questions or also feedback for how I shared the information. I would love to hear that. And then also we should as a group decide what we want to do with this knowledge or if we need to go further with it. We've talked about trying to talk about more embedded scenarios or coming up with use cases or reference implementation. So just kind of think on that a little and see where we can go with this. Great. I'm going to go snorkel. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon. But I really appreciate everyone listening, and I'll hop off, but y'all feel free to keep chatting.
Thanks for putting this together, Kate.
Thank you.
Have a good time in Mexico.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
So, anybody have any other topics for the remaining 7 minutes?
I just wanted to see anyone else has tried. I know I pinged Dehan and Tom, so you haven't tried yet. Anyone else has tried? Rob, have you tried that component example yet?
I haven't tried it yet. I'm eager to try it. I just haven't had a moment to do it.
Yeah. It's, you know what, if I'll just show you what I have. You know, if for the people who probably have joined meeting before, you know that I'm not even a developer, so I'm just trying to learn the really what's underneath there. Let me share my screen first. Actually, may I get the sharing? Yeah. So we still have a few minutes. Yeah, I'll just show you what kind of problem I have. Okay. Can you see now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I probably did something wrong, but I don't know what. So what I did is I just download the Wasm time here, and then of course put the spin, download the spin in the same directory. So I mean the instruction in the both that example, most of the example assume that I guess you know this well. So it's very good. It walks you through how to set it up. But ideally for someone like me who I just want something to work out of the box. So so I don't know whether I probably didn't do something right. So this is a directory structure, and then when I do how do I have the, no, I don't even have it. So what is that? Let me see. I have some. I need to see what I run last time. So I follow that component example. The last step I had was, let me see. I was able to finish build, and then when I do run, it did not run properly. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. That's the command. Let me get that. So
I think it doesn't get compiled. As far as I can see. As far as I can see, the error, that's a reference error. So it doesn't get compiled yet.
Yeah, but the build for this one, for the add example, I already finished build. It was okay.
Can you see in the example?
Yeah, this is from the component example page.
Yeah, but you have an example folder, so can you go into that one? And
so you can see this build is successful. So build is successful. I just when I run it, and it doesn't matter where I go, I can go to any place, and it's still same. So it's not. It's the same. I think it's the same error message. So it's not a directory structure problem. But this example, so if you follow that the component example on a bytecode assign website, there's no steps to say to create this example. So this directory I created manually. I basically did I basically did mkdir example. So yeah, I don't know where that example directory was created. So
yeah, I mean, there are many things I don't know because first I don't use Windows. It's like never I used, and and I don't know very much about like this environment. But as far as I can tell, like it's you are trying to execute a library, right? It's not binary, executable. So I think that the whole process is, I think, wrong because you're trying to execute a library which is not executable. That's what the Rust trying to say.
For fun, Victor, could you run tree right now?
Tree?
Yeah.
Just tree?
Yeah. I think you need to be pointing it to target Wasm 32 WASI release, and then I don't know, it looks as if you don't have anything in a build directory, so I don't see a module for you to run.
Okay. So, but I did build, if you see here, it says build successful. I don't know.
Yeah, the build is like a library, right? Components.
Okay.
Component has been built,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't get executed because
Okay.
it is not executable.
Yeah, the question is, where is this add application, right? That needs to be built into a binary.
Yeah.
But I haven't played with it, so I can't say.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, yeah, I'm not a developer, so I'm right. I must have done something wrong, something stupid. I don't know where. So okay. Anyway, that's what I have. So so if you successfully done your step, do you mind like document the steps so I can try it? Just follow.
Do they have like a repository on GitHub about this documentation?
So this is the example. Let me see. So the Wasm component it's on the bytecode alliance. Let me see where it is. On the documentation. Let me find that.
Yeah, if they have, I would create the issue for them. I think that's going to be the good point for them, right? Because you know, I'm a beginner and I just try out, but it didn't work. So that maybe the documentation is not good for the user experience. So I think that's going to be the good information for them too.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe as I said, I never use both Rust or so none of this. So
yeah.
If you try it and then find out same problem, yeah, let's maybe do that. I follow that example I just posted. That's the component step for Rust. It did not work for me. Oh, hey Joe. Hey Joe.
Just got the tail end.
Yeah, welcome. So we actually talk about this meeting happens every week. Do you mind if your presentation?
Every second week, I think.
Oh, second week. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe next meeting we can talk about your book.
Yeah, that should work if that's fine with the members. Sure.
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll add it to the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're at the end of the meeting, so.
Yeah, but we need to drop now. So
yeah.
Joe,
no problem.
Join the next meeting and we can chat.
Sounds good. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks and on Slack.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.